Warning, this episode contains mild to heavy explicit spoilers. Listen at your own risk.
Reviews, discussions, and theories about films in horror, sci-fi, and genre. This is the Horror Deconstruction. Like, share, and subscribe to hear more.
I take no pleasure in what I will say about this movie, as I took no pleasure in watching it. To see such a steep decline in quality from a director I root for is not only disappointing, it's demoralizing. A sexually gratified John decides at last minute he's not going to drop off a sex worker he's recently had relations with in fear of people knowing what he's done. Instead, he leaves her in the Silent Hill-esque gas station in the middle of nowhere. This woman, in a brightly colored minidress, enters the all-too immaculate road stop bathroom. Seriously, this bathroom is cleaner than Antarctica, and is soon menaced by an unseen force. Prepared to defend herself, the woman produces a switchblade, and with the lighting of a Saw movie, investigates where these random sounds are coming from. Instead of being proactive in her survival, as soon as she sees outside the exit a smoke-filled night and the silhouette of a menacing stranger, instead of, using her knife, she, in a badly edited sequence, lays on her back and is yanked out of the said public bathroom into the opening title. We can learn much from the opening of this film, The Price We Pay, with its awful acting, use of unnecessary camera movements, phony set pieces, and lazy shock tactics. Director Ryuhei Kitamura is slipping further into director jail with another half-baked idea. Kitamura, the Japanese-born filmmaker who came onto the scene with a deliciously bizarre Evil Dead meets Night of the Living Dead meets any Yakuza film cult classic Versus, had a bevy of watchable highbrow B-movies such as Azumi, Alive, Godzilla Final Wars, Midnight Meat Train, and No One Lives. There is a Sam Raimi-esque urgency to his filmmaking, that classic Japanese 90s aesthetic that he's trying to effuse with American cinema, but it doesn't quite work. At least in recent titles. Downrange was an interesting movie but quite empty, and this film is a complete, in my opinion, at least screw-up on all technical levels. So how does this play out? Well, a young woman named Grace, who's behind on her apartment bills, visits her landlord at his pawn shop. As the lascivious pervert owner pitches an idea of flesh for payment to Grace, his store is suddenly being robbed by a trio of masked criminals. Something, the robbery goes wrong, one of the thieves is shot in the leg, one of the criminals shoots a worker. Instead of a graphic kill, it looks more like the guy is wearing a red tie-dye shirt. Somehow, through a foolish mistake, Grace is kidnapped, used as collateral, and also their getaway driver when the thug's original wheelman speeds off at the sound of gunfire. Now we have two fairly good actors giving career-worst performances. Playing the male leads in this film are Stephen Dorff as Cody, a robbery facilitator, I guess whatever that means in this, and Emil Hirsch as Alex, brother to the now-injured robber Shane, played by Tanner Zagarino. Shane is of no consequence in this film as he's relegated to an NPC character, although he's the only one with common sense and decency to at least one point cut out Grace to save her life. My focus is on Hirsch, who was great in The Autopsy of Jane Doe, a movie you must immediately see after watching this video and giving it a like and a share and subscribe. But in here, he's playing a bug-eyed mullet-wearing overactor with horrible dialogue. Dorff, who is in two of my favorite films of all time, Blade and The Gate. Seriously, see those movies after you watch this video and give it a like, share, and subscribe. Puts in the worst performance I've ever seen him do. He reaches, or should I say lowers himself to Bruce Willis levels of acting. At least Willis has an unfortunate diagnosis that explains his issues. Dorff is literally sleepwalking through this movie. His character, who should be stern and calm, is coming off as indifferent and looking like he's thinking of his next car payment. Awful. It makes me think that Kitamura might have had some issues directing these guys. Now, Kitamura is fluent in English, so it can't be a language barrier. Listen to his really good interview on Mick Garris's Postmortem podcast. So I think he was just worried more about visuals than the believable characters because the performance of these two stars is comically awful. That said, Grace, played by Gigi Zumbado, is serviceable, but she had to deal with such paper-thin script, you can't blame her for her character being not even half-note. Though, we're really here for a movie that is a mix between Saw, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and From Dusk Till Dawn. Do we get that? Yes and no. It may look at times like those films, but resembles their terrible sequels instead. Through a series of predictable events, the thieves and Grace end up at an isolated farm where they convince the farmhand Danny, played by Tyler Sanders, before their friends pick them up. Eventually, these leads to all hell breaking loose as Alex decides to snoop around and finds himself in a labyrinth including prison cells and surgical tables. Subsequently, he and Cody find themselves under the restraints by a maniac doctor played by Vernon Wells. He's actually good in this. A man who, with his crew, kidnap people and use their organs to supply to people in actual need. His daughter was killed by an abusive husband, which is the reason why he has become sort of a vengeful doctor. I actually think this is a pretty noble idea, if only he did it to criminals but not to random sex workers like it happens in the opening. So it doesn't make these guys too benevolent to me. An actual interesting character in the film is the towering Erica Aaron playing Jody, essentially a gigantic female version of Leatherface. Now, if she were given more to do in this film, it would be nice, and I actually did feel sad for her later on with her interactions with her relative Danny, because you can see how she's been manipulated by the doctor the whole time. But Danny's allegiances and switcheroos make no sense in the way that this film plays out. But that, of course, is due to writing. Is there a graphic gore? Sure. Terrible CGI? Of course. An extensive look at some of the surgical grossness? Sure. So it doesn't matter. A boring low-budget feature that finds itself stuck in one room in each major sequence, with boring characters doing nothing of interest. Even Jody's cool electric baton is useless in this trying to be dark and seedy slasher, and it becomes more of a list of cobbled best hits. This was the worst film of the year until Ennisman for me. 3 out of 10 horny pawn shop owners. This has been the Horror Deconstruction.